Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. I hope that everyone that tuned in to watch enjoyed the live stream that we ended up doing the other day. I'm hoping to get more on the go. I've been talking to a couple people who are I've been talking to one guy who's interested in possibly doing something more in Canadian based, and I'm hoping to get more of that group of people together again in the future in order to have another live stream. So I hope you enjoyed it. I wasn't able to put out an episode on the weekend because I was kind of prepping for it, had a few other things on the go as well, so I'm taking the time today in order to do that because there's been a lot that has gone on over the last week or so. Probably the big news would be that it became official that Patrick Brown got kicked out of the Conservative caucus. That was revealed by Vic Fideli over the last week. So that was something that Patrick Brown was trying to hang on to. He was trying to hang on to his seat inside the Conservative Party, but they were saying that he was kicked out and he would resume his seat as an independent. So Patrick Brown was kicked out of the caucus.
Our breaking news, a political shocker just moments ago. Former Ontario Progressive Conservative leader Patrick Brown has entered the race for the party's leadership.
Wow, that happened quickly. So yeah, after he was kicked out, it must have been the very next day, within hours of the final polling, within hours of the final paperwork having to be filed by the candidates, Patrick Brown re-entered the Conservative leadership race. He just stepped down a month before, but suddenly he's back in. What a twist. As these allegations around him started falling down, he decided that it might be a perfect time for him to try and regain his leadership as head of the Progressive Conservatives. And I'd be curious what would happen if he actually managed to pull that off and actually managed to regain the leadership. What he would be doing with his inner circle, considering his inner circle all but abandoned him in his time of need. So I think we would see a much harsher Patrick Brown. I think we would see a much less trusting Patrick Brown because after what he's experienced, especially some of the people that betrayed him were some very close people to him. So it's definitely be hard to trust after that. However, that being said, I do not believe that Patrick Brown will actually win the... I don't think he'll re-win his leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party. A lot of people in Ontario, when Patrick Brown came in, they didn't really like him. They found that he was too liberal, and they didn't like certain policies that he was pushing. For instance, he was one that he was saying that he was advocating for the carbon tax. That was something that I wasn't very happy with when it was first announced. But a lot of people were willing to, at the very least, bite their tongues, plug their nose, and go in on June 7th and vote for him over Kathleen Wynne. He definitely would have won that. Andrea Horwath has been fucking unnoticeable. Throughout all of Ontario politics, she's been unnoticeable, but we got an election coming up, and do you hear anything in the papers or anywhere about the Ontario NDP party? No, you don't. They've really just been a sideline party for, well, they always kind of have in Ontario, but underneath Andrea Horwath, the NDP has just been non-existent, so there's absolutely no way she's going to come in. And one reason I would not vote for her, and I don't think a lot of the younger generation is willing to vote for her, especially those in college right now, is because she was one of the only people, like one of the only parties, that was actually against the back-to-work legislation that Wynne signed into place, so that was unpopular at the time because a lot of students, a lot of parents, a lot of people wanted to go back to school. So by about beginning of week 3, we were ready for back to work legislation. So it was still a few weeks too late. And Andrea Horwath, if she was in charge, would have never signed that legislation, which meant the strike would have gone on more than 5 weeks, even though by that point it was already reaching a historical... We've already actually had passed a historical level. It had already been the longest teacher strike in Ontario history. So she's been non-fucking existent. So Patrick Brown was a shoo-in to win before all this happened. And I've even been defensive of Patrick Brown through these allegations. You know, I've been willing to stick up for him. I've been investigating, trying to figure out whatever I can to break down in these allegations, because I don't think anybody should be put through what he's been put through. If he committed the actual acts, then sure, he should be put through what he's facing right now. But as it stands, it doesn't look like that is the situation. So I've been willing to go to bat to Patrick Brown just for that reason. Just for the fact that he had these slanderous allegations put together against him. However, now that the door is open and we have an opportunity to pick a new leader, Patrick Brown doesn't stand a chance. Now, I actually think he will do better than some of the other people. I think he's going to beat out Caroline Mulroney. I think he's going to beat out Christine Elliott. There's no way he's beating out Doug Ford. Doug Ford is more of what the people want. He's a populist person. He's a populist candidate. He's going with the grassroots, which is what we want to see. But Patrick Brown is just going to rebuild the platform that he had beforehand, because that was one thing he was critical about once he re-entered the race. He found that it was too risky for the PC party to be scrapping the platform and what he called the people's choice, people's guarantee, which meant that if he did not achieve a certain amount of his promises over the 4 years, then he wasn't going to run for re-election come after those 4 years. So he would step down and let somebody else run for the Conservative Party as the premier. So he wanted to keep the people's guarantee. He wanted to keep the carbon tax in there. He wanted to keep the same platform that he had beforehand. The problem is it wasn't very popular with many of Ontario's conservatives, especially the social conservatives. A lot of them have felt pushed out by the Progressive Conservative Party. And this has actually made a lot of people on the right angry, because they found that Patrick Brown has split the right-wing vote in Ontario. That now, ever since Patrick Brown came into play, there's been 2 or 3 smaller parties that have spun off from the Progressive Conservatives, which means that the vote is split amongst the right wing rather than being united under the Progressive Conservative Party. However, there was nothing in them for the Progressive Conservative Party. In fact, I've watched a few videos of people who have said that if Patrick Brown gets back in as the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, they're done. They're done with the Conservative Party of Ontario. But most people are definitely leaning towards Doug Ford. He is more of what people wanted to see. I think they would have loved to see Doug Ford win it back in 2015, but Patrick Brown was the one. I don't even think Doug Ford was in it back then. But he's got more of what people want. He's willing to cut the taxes. He's not going to input the carbon tax, which a lot of people want. He plans to bring jobs back because we're having a hard time right now. And we can use some jobs considering of the catastrophe that has been the Kathleen Wynne government, especially since 2018. The $15 minimum wage, which is really $14 now. It goes up another dollar come January 2019. So we're at $14 now, but that's destroyed enough businesses in Ontario. And again, in a year's time, minimum wage will go up by another dollar, which is going to be even worse. So in that time, we need somebody to come in who can help bring back jobs and make shit easier on businesses in order for the fact that they will open their doors for employment opportunities for the rest of us. That man is going to be Doug Ford. He's the one who's talking specifically about that. In fact, I love the imagery that he used. He talked about, it's like, in fact, when I'm premier, when I get voted in, I'm going to put a big sign in Ontario that says, we're open for business. That's kind of what you want to hear right now, especially for how hard it is to find a job. A lot of part-time work has been destroyed while new full-time jobs have been created. These are in the public sector, which are less stable. If economic hard times happens or your funding gets cut, then you're more likely to lose your job. So these are not permanent full-time positions. And part-time jobs usually lead into full-time positions. So when you had so many part-time jobs cut, you may have created more full-time jobs, but the problem is there's actually less opportunity in the long run. And actually there is still less opportunity now, because with part-time work compared to full-time work, you only have a set amount of people that can get into the full-time positions, while the part-time positions are much more open for everybody else. Sort of in my position, for instance, say you're going to school or you just need to get back in the workplace and make a little bit extra money, you just need that part-time job. It's good for you. Part-time jobs are actually good to start. They do make it hard on the family. I'm not going to lie. I've been there where you start off part-time and then you struggle for a little bit. But one of the reasons is that the company has to make sure that you're a good fit. And this is one way to do so. Also, maybe they just need a little bit extra help. My point is that it's actually quite disastrous for how many part-time jobs were cut in January 2018 due to this raise in minimum wage. If Patrick Brown implements the carbon tax, that's not going to change anything in that regards. We're just going to be taxed more, and we're not having any more real jobs that are being created. So we're kind of in the same position right now. On top of this, a lot has come out over the last couple of years against Patrick Brown and about his leadership. A lot of people have been talking about ballot stuffing at the boxes. We've just heard that about 70,000 PC memberships were illegitimate. There's been a couple of people under Patrick Brown, a couple of MPPs that have had their ridings, they're voting for their riding, been considered illegitimate, and they've been polled as members, as representatives of that riding. So there's been a lot that has happened under Patrick Brown, as well as many people are saying that a lot of money has gone missing out under Patrick Brown. Well, for instance, people are saying, well, if the 70,000 memberships under Patrick Brown have gone missing, well, each one you buy a membership for a year for $10, so that is $700,000. So people are wondering, where is that money? Where is that money then? So there's been a lot of shit under Patrick Brown. There's been a lot of corruption. There's been a lot of move towards more of the center and the left for the Progressive Conservative Party, leaving behind the true members of the right. They're leaving behind their libertarians. They're leaving behind their social conservatives. I'm in no way a social conservative, but a social conservative is a very big part of the right. But Doug Ford, if he could unify these votes, he can get the social conservative vote, he can get the economic conservative vote, he can get the libertarian vote, and there's many different versions of right-wing politics. But he can unite these underneath his banner, underneath Ford Nation. So this is why I believe that Doug Ford is still the shoe-in to win. Tanya Granick-Allen she will pull in the social conservative vote, I think, for sure, but some of that will be split between Doug Ford, and Doug Ford wants to do more than just what her main focus is, just getting social conservative issues and social conservatives themselves more recognized again in Canadian society. But that's all she really wants to do. So that would be more of an activist and social push thing to do. I think it wouldn't be really a political move necessarily. That's just my opinion. But if her whole point is just get social conservatism more recognized and more acceptable again I guess in this case it would just be in Ontario, because that's really where her influence would end. At the same time, you're not really doing much for everybody else. You're doing something for a small group of people, but everyone else who doesn't really fit in that category, what have you got for us? For instance, I'm in no way a social conservative. I'm definitely more libertarian. What does Tanya Granick-Allen's platform offer me? Nothing. So I have no reason to vote for her. Doug Ford's platform does offer me something. It also offers the social conservatives something. So this is why I believe that regardless of the fact that Patrick Brown's coming in and a lot of people were pissed off, and he still has a strong base of support, he will not come back in as the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. I really don't like that this is the way that things went out for him, and I personally don't think it is a problem for him to be running again. I think he should have the right to run again. But we've seen what 2 years, I guess about closer to 3 years under Patrick Brown brought the Progressive Conservative Party. Sure, he built up a lot of popularity, a lot of membership, which we haven't seen for a while. But one of the reasons that he built up that popularity is because he was more of a red Tory. So he attracted more of the centrist vote. He attracted even some of the center-left vote. I don't know how many lefties he was really attracting, and probably none. But the point is, he was able to branch out over a larger category of people. Then this extended to the right, at least to somewhat into the left. So that's why he was able to pull in this membership. But in the end, I think Doug Ford can still pull in the popularity of the membership, similar to Patrick Brown, simply because he's coming in a similar way, in a similar way and similar situation that Trump came into politics in America. He's coming in when people feel desperate, when they feel that a lot of their opportunity, a lot of their jobs have been taken away, and they do not like the way their government is acting. They feel like their government does not represent the people whatsoever, but represent their own personal interests. It is essentially the neoliberal, neocon type people that are really in power right now. And many people are sick and tired of that form of politics. Doug Ford is definitely not that type of politics. He's also the type of guy not to back down. If he says that he's going to do something, he's going to do it. He came out and immediately said he was against the carbon tax. He was the first person to say it. He was the first person to give a full-on guarantee. People like, I think it was Caroline Mulroney, says, well, I need to consult with some people. And essentially she said she had to consult with people and see how popular of an idea it was. So it really wasn't about what the people wanted. She just wanted to see how much popularity she would get if she was to introduce the carbon tax. And she saw that it was not something that people wanted. So she says, oh no, I'm against the carbon tax. Absolutely. I've always been against the carbon tax. When in reality, she's just trying to figure out what gets her the most votes, the most popularity. Christine Elliott worked for Kathleen Wynne. That's enough said. Now she's trying to come out again and say like how terrible the Kathleen Wynne government is. Well, you worked for them. That's your old boss. So you gotta at least recognize that. But she doesn't recognize that. She comes out and she tries to just present herself being completely anti-Wynne. But apparently it was good enough for her to work for them. So this is why Doug Ford is going to win. This is why Patrick Brown is not going to win, and he doesn't stand a chance. However, I do think Patrick Brown will come in second. Between everything, I think Patrick Brown will be the second to finish behind Doug Ford. It'll go. My prediction is Ford, Brown, and this is where it gets difficult. I think Christine Elliott, Tanya Granick-Allen, and then Caroline Mulroney. I actually think that Mulroney is the most unpopular choice amongst the people. Elliott, I think just from what I've seen already in the past, she doesn't have like a super amount of support, but I think she may pull in a more support than Tanya Granick-Allen maybe. Tanya Granick-Allen is the leader of an organization that has 85,000 social conservatives in Ontario standing behind her, but that doesn't mean that every single one of those people is going to go out and get a PC membership and vote for her. And that still would not be enough to get her the support she needed. She would still need way more people to come out in support for her if she was going to win. But she's not. So we can expect Doug Ford going up against Kathleen Wynne. I'm actually really confident in myself when I say that. This is the one time I think I'm very safe in saying that Doug Ford is going to win. Ever since he came in, from that first time I saw him, I just knew this guy is going to be the next leader of the Progressive Conservatives. And if it turns out I'm wrong, then I'll have to come out here with my tail between my legs to apologize and say how I was wrong. But I don't think I am. The other thing that's worth mentioning is a lot of these politicians, the candidates running, are acting as if they're the only one that could beat Kathleen Wynne. That no matter what ends up happening, they're the only one. If we vote anybody else, for instance, Caroline Mulroney says, like, I'm the only candidate to beat Kathleen Wynne. So she's suggesting that you cannot vote in any of these candidates or you will lose to Kathleen Wynne. That's not true. Right now, every single candidate on the PC party, as the polling goes, they say could beat Kathleen Wynne, regardless of which one it is. That's why during my video in the debate, I kept saying it doesn't matter which one gets it. It's for that exact reason. Because when they've looked at the stats, they're saying any single one who goes up against Kathleen Wynne has a better chance to win than Kathleen Wynne because her popularity is so shit. People hate her so much, and people are done with 15 years of Liberal rule in Ontario. She had one of the big thing that came up during the debate was the sex education, which absolutely it should be I agree with Doug Ford. You should be sticking to the facts of sex. You should not be creating your own. You should not be teaching your liberal ideology in there, because that, excuse me, because that is not the time. School is all about learning the facts, which means you learn how to properly have sex, how babies are made, and what happens in the process of how babies are made. And the real reason we do this is so that way when our kids are getting older, when they reach their teenage years and they start getting to want to fuck, they know what the consequences are. But there's a big difference between teaching your kids about the actual biology of sex and then teaching about genders and transsexualism and homosexuality. I don't care if you're gay or you're transsexual, but that doesn't mean that kids as young as kindergarten, or maybe it's not kindergarten, maybe it's grade 1, but that's still pretty damn young to be learning about that sort of thing. And it's going to confuse the hell out of the kids. In a lot of ways, it confuses the hell out of us adults, but we're expecting like 8-year-olds to be able to figure this out. And we also expect 8-year-olds to be able to make up their own mind in this decision? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, either one of them can win, because Kathleen Wynne has been such a fuck-up for Ontario, especially with her majority government. But in the end, I think it's going to be Ford. So right now, one conversation that the government has been having, and they've been having it with the media, is the fact that Canadian print is starting to die. The government has been starting to work out bailouts for our newspapers in order so that way they can stay alive. Now there's a few different articles that have been discussing this. One of them that I found it from was in the Globe and Mail. And I kind of just quickly cut and pasted a few key parts of what I thought was important in the article just into here. So it says the Liberal government is preparing an aid package for print media in the coming weeks with an emphasis on local news and innovative technologies, Heritage Minister Mélanie Joly says. Still, a new Nano/Globe and Mail poll found that 55% of Canadians support or somewhat support additional government funding to keep local news sources open. On the other hand, 41% of respondents were opposed or somewhat opposed. Ms. Joly has endured much criticism since unveiling a new cultural policy in September that did not directly address the crisis in the media industry. Still, she is promising that her new plan will not bail out models that are no longer viable. Okay, now here's where I see the problems in this. Right now, as it stands, over the last few years, especially over the last few years, we've been having a big problem with the media, with the way that they've been reporting. We've been having a problem with significant bias, lies of omission, fake news, on and on and on. And in that case, I literally mean fake news, like fake news stories that have come out, like completely untrue. So in that time, we've been seeing this out of, mostly it's been the national news media. So in America, it's CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, you know the standards you'll turn on and you'll see. Up in Canada, it's CBC, Global News, CTV, blah, 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 and all those other news stations. So we're having a big problem there. However, as I understand it, when we're discussing the fake news problem, apparently at the local level, and the municipal level, the print is still pretty good. And I think for one of these reasons is the fact that the people who are working in these local newspapers, they live in the area, they talk to the people, they know what's going on. So it's a much better form of news than you would get on the national level. Say if you go to CBC and they're talking about something that happened in Moncton, is the CBC who's getting their information to their headquarters in Ottawa or Toronto. I think it's in Ottawa though. But when they're getting the information from their headquarters, they're in a completely different city. However, the local Moncton newspaper, these are people that live in the area. Hell, their neighbors may even know who these people are affected by, say, this great disaster that happened in Moncton, just as an example. So the local level of media usually is willing to give more accurate information. So that's one thing I've actually started recently these days trying to move to. I'm trying to find more local sources in stories. So if something happens in Baltimore, let's say, I don't just want to read it off of MSNBC News or something like that, but I actually want to find a local paper inside of the area that may have the article. That's what I'm trying to do. Just trying to update my information and my research to make it a little bit better. So when the government starts talking about that, much of this emphasis is going to be at the local level of news. So your local metro newspaper or something along those lines. They're now giving money to these in order to support them. Now, if the government is giving money to them, that also means that they're kind of relying on that government support in order to stay open, which means the government has much more control over what sort of information they can put in or out. The other thing I notice is while in our situation this is being used under the we're saying it's our heritage minister, it has everything to do with heritage, our newspapers. It's not much different than the similar story that's going off on other parts of the world. For instance, right now in Great Britain, there's a similar conversation going on about the government buying out newspapers. And it's being done by their cultural minister. Cultural heritage, it's practically the same minister. So this is being brought in under, in our case, the heritage ministry. And this is why we need to give them money. It's all part of our Canadian heritage. When in reality, they're the ones that we rely on to get our information from. So even if they have control of the CBC, let's say, because they give so much money to them every year, and now they'll probably be giving money to some of the bigger, as well, to the bigger sources of news, I assume. Even though they're saying there's more emphasis on the local level, I see no reason that CTV or Global News will get this sort of funding as well. Which means that they've got the news at the top levels at the national news. They got that at the top level, and now they're branching off and they're seeping down and getting into our local papers. So it worries me that we're going to see some form of censorship coming out of this. That now it's not good enough that that's being restricted. That the CBC is under their control. It's not good enough that CTV and Global News have a good left-leaning bias or anything like that. But now they want the local papers to do the same thing. One thing I think this may have to do with is it may have something to do with the fact that Postmedia is a company, an organization that could start in 2010, and the main branches were National Post, Financial Post. This is sort of when they came together because they were originally different newspapers. Financial Post has been around for years, and this was the startup of the National Post, so they kind of combined together. And Postmedia has branched out in order to take over many, many, many different types of our news that we know of. I went looking for some information. I put together some graphs here, and there's a lot more going on Postmedia, but as we can see here, they own much of the local sources. So they've got the Ottawa Citizen, the Ottawa Sun, the London Free Press. They've got Winnipeg Sun, Montreal Gazette, the Province, Vancouver Sun, Calgary Herald. So they've got a lot more of the local level ones. As at the same time, Postmedia tends to be more of National Post came out. It was supposed to be a more conservative paper. However, I would say they're more of a fiscally conservative paper because some of the articles they've come out in the past has seemed even to me defensive of the Trudeau government. So that's why I've been a little confused by National Post, by where their actual stance is, but they seem to have a strong fiscal conservative stance. But then all these local newspapers, not all of them are actually a more conservative newspaper, but for instance, the Sun, Ottawa Sun, Toronto Sun, these are more conservative papers. So one thing I've wondered is if this is a response by the government in some way to try and reclaim some control over the news and over the information that is being put out. Because Postmedia doesn't necessarily go with the left wing all the time, especially if we're getting more into Toronto Sun. They are getting more into being socially conservative as well. And I think a lot of people are starting to go more towards this model. It's unclear at this time if Postmedia will receive any of these funds that the government is talking about. But it seems to me that this is a government takeover of our news and our newspaper, because don't forget that not that long ago, Justin Trudeau spoke about how Facebook, if they didn't get a handle on their fake news, then they were going to start facing tighter regulation. And this came just on the heels of the PeopleKind controversy, when everybody was making fun of him for saying something so fucking stupid. When his top advisor Gerald Butts comes out and says that this is the people who are criticizing Trudeau are part of right-wing white supremacy movements, so pretty much calling anybody who was making fun of Trudeau as white supremacists. And then right after that's when Trudeau says, you need to get a handle on your fake news. So apparently now any criticism of the Trudeau government is considered fake news. And the same government that is making that claim is now about to buy out a lot, if not the majority, of our local papers. I do think this has a more direct response to the sort of to this monopoly that Postmedia has assembled, because the other news sources, they seem to be underneath Rogers and Bell respectively. That these are the companies that will do it. As we can see here, we got the BCE, which is the parent company, and Bell Communication, I can't remember what it actually stands for. Then we go down to Bell Media, and then we can see down here as it branches off that we have different news sources. We got CTV, which is owned by them, which is owned CTV News Channel, which is in association with CP24 News and the Business News Network. They own Globe and Mail, Discovery Channel, TSN. And then if we look more towards the Rogers side, it's very similar. They own City News, Omni Television, which has a few different smaller news sources at the local level, Sportsnet, Viceland, which is a part of Vice Media. However, recently it seems that in 2018 they were going to be ending their partnership. This had to do with them, mostly to do with Viceland wasn't making a lot of money. We have Maclean's Magazine. Hunter and Maclean's is owned by Rogers. And then when we were talking about Rogers Radio, they are the third largest broadcasting company in Canada. They are the largest in Ontario. As we says here, it owns and operates 52 radio stations in Alberta, BC, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, and Ontario. So as we can see, there is a monopoly on our news right now, and I think the government is trying to get their hand inside of that monopoly. But one thing is, I'm pretty sure would have to go back to double check just to be 100%. But Bell Media and Rogers, these are companies that lobby the government a lot. I think they even receive some government funds in some regards. So the government does at least have them, in some regards, by the balls. So I just can't help but feel that this is all part of a larger government takeover by Justin Trudeau, especially to be done now. This would be the time to do it, because when the election comes up in a couple years, you want to have as much control over the media and give yourself as much good attention as possible. It seemed pretty obvious to me that this is what he did in the 2015 election, because Harper cut 115 million, I think it was 115 million from the CBC's budget over, I think it was since 2011. Justin Trudeau promised to not only give back that 115 million to the CBC, but then on top of that, an additional 35 million on top. Personally, I found when that announcement was made, there was no bad coverage of Justin Trudeau on the CBC. Suddenly, he seemed to be their candidate of choice. He already seemed to be their candidate of choice. But after that announcement, it seemed like they were just, that's our guy. Now on top of this, the CBC is also asking recently, while they got more funds, they also asked recently that they wanted to go ad-free, and they were requesting another 400 million from the government in order to be able to go ad-free. So that's more money getting funneled into them. And not that long ago, it was announced that there was going to be, where did I leave that information? Not that long ago, it was announced that the government was then going to be giving more money into, I think it was something to do with culture. But this money, I'm going to pull it up right now, don't worry, I'm not leaving you with that. But anyway, so there's going to be about $1.9 billion from the Canadian government that is getting put back into, I think it's cultural services is what they were saying it is. And in this, there's going to be about $675 million extra that will go to the CBC. So it seems lately that the CBC just keeps bringing in larger and larger amounts of money, especially under the Trudeau Foundation. Of course, now this is when my Microsoft Word document decides to freeze up as I'm trying to look everything up. It's always the ways it goes. Always. So, as I scroll through my notes here and see what I can find. Yeah. It was in March 2016, the Liberal government announced a $1.86 billion increase in funds over 5 years as part of a new cultural spending program. Of this, $675 million is going to the CBC, an additional $135 million per year over the course of that 5 years. So that was from 2016 all the way up to 2021 when this is supposed to be taking place. So that was announced in March, and it was in late 2016 when the CBC wanted to go ad-free, and then they requested an additional $400 million from the government in order to do that. Jesus Christ. That's a lot of money that we're throwing into the CBC. Just a lot of money in general that we're throwing in. There was also a chart that came along. I think it was a Toronto Star. I think it was a Toronto Star article. Yeah, it was. And as we take a look at it here... Oh, crap. I just closed it on myself. So as we take a look at it, yeah, most of it is going to the CBC. Most of it is going to CBC, which the $675 million. And then as we look down the list, we have $550 million going to Canada Council for the Arts, $168 million Canada Cultural Space Funds, on and on and on. Anyway, the point is out of that money that's going into that is going towards this cultural program, most of it is going towards the CBC. Well, Justin Trudeau has been caught up in one controversy after another after another. In fact, he just finds himself in another one just now, because our Prime Minister is in India right now on part of a 7-day trip. He brought some of his ministers there. He brought his entire family. His wife Sophie, his 3 kids. They're all there with him. And he shows up in India and immediately gets snubbed by the Indian government. It seems that many people are now caught on to Trudeau's the way that Trudeau is his bullshit, because just before he left, he went into the United States and he was doing the trip there. Never once did he try and contact President Trump, even though he's in his country, and not once did President Trump in that entire time address that Justin Trudeau was in America. He didn't care. And then when we ended up arriving in India earlier this week. And the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, who usually goes to meet all the world leaders when they come in, he sent his Minister of Agriculture to come meet Justin Trudeau at the airport. The Minister of Agriculture, when the Prime Minister would always greet the world leaders himself. Oh my God. How much do they fucking dislike Trudeau if that's the case? Now, there's reasons for this. I'm sorry, I don't have it pulled up in front of me. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. But anyway, Trudeau has shown some support for a radical party inside of India that is against the Prime Minister Modi. So as well, it's not like many people in Canada or Trudeau's cabinet have good relations with India. I mean, his defense minister, Prime Minister's defense minister, Harjit Sajjan, is not liked at all. And granted, this isn't in the Liberal government, but Jagmeet Singh is not liked at all by the Indian government. And I think this is probably the reason why, is that these two men were part of these. So I don't think it was anti-Sikh necessarily, but they were Sikh radicals, if I remember correctly. But, so they were these Sikh radicals that Trudeau is supporting. So now they want nothing to do with them. And we just found out, actually, that this 7-day trip that he's taking, suddenly we find out that it's going to take half a day for him to meet with the Prime Minister and the rest of the Indian ministers that he's got to meet with in order to do what he's got to do. Half a day. And since then, we found Trudeau and his family going to zoos, meeting elephants, going to the Taj Mahal, dressing up in very nice Indian clothing, and visiting all the fucking sites, the entire time being done on our goddamn tax dollar. Our goddamn tax dollar is paying for this whole trip, and all he's doing, yet again, is going on vacation. That's what this is. It's a vacation for the Trudeaus. The royal Trudeaus, as many people are starting to call them. Yes, because that's what they are. They see themselves as a goddamn fucking royalty of Canada who should be able to do whatever the fuck they want on our goddamn dollar. It's funny, actually. I have a friend of mine he's significantly older. I actually met him through when I was working at I used to work for a coffee shop, and then he was just a regular customer who came in. We kind of hit it off. We kind of became friends. Anyway, when I was still more liberal, he's been a conservative for years. So he was been around since the Pierre Elliott Trudeau time, and this was the first time I heard somebody really raging against the Pierre Elliott Trudeau government and how much he hated them. And the more and more I watch his son at work, Justin, I can understand it. Oh my God, if Pierre Elliott Trudeau was even remotely close to the way Justin is now, which from the way it sounds, they are very much alike, then holy shit, no wonder that my buddy, hated Pierre Elliott Trudeau. It's awful. Because they've done many of the same things, even praising a lot of the same people, like Fidel Castro. Only difference is at the time, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Castro was alive and was a dictator then, and was actually right in the middle of the process of killing and imprisoning many of his people. And Pierre Elliott Trudeau goes over to Cuba and says, what a great leader Castro is. What a great leader. And so and I just found it now, what really has the Indian government ticked off about Trudeau and his cabinet is that they feel that Canada's Sikh communities are a hotbed of separatists giving an oxygen to extremist elements. So they believe a lot of the Sikh community in Canada are part of these extremist groups, separatist groups, which pose a danger to India. And I don't believe that Justin Trudeau has really denounced them. And this was also the problem with Jagmeet Singh, was that in the Air India bombing that happened back in the 80s, I think it was, he was more or less refusing to disavow it, even though that some 200 and some odd Canadians were killed on that trip, not to mention a lot of Indians as well. So you piss off both people when you don't want to admit a terrorist attack is a terrorist attack, because you're pissing off the Canadians because so many of our people were killed. You're pissing off the Indians because their plane was bombed along with their own people, which makes them look bad too. So they have plenty of reasons not to like us. But we've been hearing more and more about this thing that Trudeau's trying to implement some sort of deal with the Indians right now. You know, that was something we were hearing coming out of it. And so far, we've heard that the Canadian and Indian companies have a deal worth $1 billion in the Trudeau trip, and it was supposed to create jobs in Canada. We're like, oh my God, you know, did Trudeau actually get a good deal for Canada? He's going to bring in $1 billion in revenue, create jobs here? Holy shit, who's this guy? Where's he been the last 2 years? Yeah, not so much. That was what was found out. That's what we were more or less being told, except not long afterwards, the Prime Minister's office said that the Prime Minister misspoke when he made the announcement in front of business audience. And he said that $1 billion of Indian investments coming, when he said that there was the business, he misspoke when he said there's going to be $1 billion in Indian investments coming into Canada. He says that there is going to be $250 million flowing into Canada. Okay, no, I wouldn't have a problem with that, even if it wasn't $1 billion. I'm like, well, you told us $1 billion, so fuck you. But okay, 250 million, that's still not bad. Except the other 750 million is flowing into India. There's no jobs being created. We get $250 million, and they get 750. So Trudeau went over there, made himself look like a fool, lost $500 million in Canadian money, and created no new jobs. The entire time going around on taxpayer money. You know, it wasn't that long ago. It really wasn't that long ago when Justin Trudeau looked one of our veterans in the eye, a veteran who lost one of his legs to an IED, improvised explosive device, while serving in Afghanistan, looked him dead in the fucking eyes and told him, the veterans are just asking for too much. The veterans, you guys just, you know what? If you just weren't so damn greedy, then, and you weren't asking for so much, then, you know, there would be no problem. We'd have money for you. But you know what? You go out, you fight, you get hurt, you die, you have crippling injuries, you know, but you guys are just asking for way too much. He said from his throne that he's lived on his whole fucking life and never served a day in the fucking military. Now, hypocrisy here. I've never served a day in the fucking military. Partly because my wife was having none of that. Actually, I would have loved to have done a tour or two in the forces. I think it would have been a very good learning experience, but my wife was not the type to be able to put up with that. Her borderline personality comes with a lot of anxiety, so she was just having none of that. I had a choice, military or with the woman I love. I chose the woman I love. I'm hoping someday that I will have that opportunity, maybe something more local even, but in the meantime, I haven't served in the military. Justin Trudeau hasn't served in the military, but Justin Trudeau has spent his whole life living as the Prime Minister's son. He lived in 24 Sussex Drive when he was a kid, and he spent his whole life living a great fucking rich life with a dynasty name. Life has been easy for Justin Trudeau. I mean, before he even ran for the leadership party, I think he said that he had backpacked in something like 80 different countries. Can you even name 80 different countries off the top of your head? Can you? No. How many people in this world have seen 80 different countries? Not many. And those who have usually have done so because it's on business. That's usually the people who have seen that much of the world. It's not usually for vacation or personal time. Justin Trudeau has had so much money and so much time on his hands that he would backpack in 80 fucking different countries. But instead we're making shitty fucking deals with India. And I don't know if this is an attempt to get back on their good side. We're just acting like they're the bully that we think we can pay off, if that's what Justin Trudeau thinks. Not that they're being a bully to us, just that we're acting like that. It's like, here, just take my lunch money and leave me alone. Instead of putting that money towards the veterans, he's giving He's giving, well, after we take away the 250 that we get back, he's giving away $500 million. You're telling me that 100 million of that money couldn't be dedicated to veteran services or something like that? You couldn't find, like, I mean, even 100 million is too much to be sending to veteran services. I don't know. Honestly, off the top of my head and without the numbers in front of me, I don't know if it's too much or too little. But you're telling me that you can't find any money for the veterans, yet you can find $500 million to send overseas, halfway across the world, to this country that doesn't even like us all that much. I think it's about time for a Canadian revolt. I think it's about time that, and we will do so in the most Canadian way, start a petition. I know, we're not that cool as the Americans. Americans grab their guns, but you know what? We've got heavily restricted firearms in comparison. So, I guess in the end, it's just, I'm watching Trudeau spend all this money, and he's putting preference in everybody else in the world but us. We need help too. I find the problem these days with a lot of what I've noticed from the Democratic Party, what I've noticed from the Liberal Party of Canada, and a lot of the progressives and more liberal types in our countries these days, is they all want to focus on the rest of the world right now. They all want to look towards the rest of the world, wherever it needs help, and in some way jump in, be the saviors to help them get out of their poverty or their crime-ridden country, whatever it happens to be. They want to focus outside of our own borders in order to do this, but our problems at home, we still have many of them. We can't go looking, hell, to steal a line from Jordan Peterson. How are you supposed to change the world if you can't even clean your own room? How are we supposed to go out and be the world's savior, go out and solve all of the world's problems, if we can't even get our own problems down? Justin Trudeau and his government, time and time again, like to tell us about how racist, sexist our country is. In fact, Catherine McKenna has just been saying recently, she's been saying it for years, but once again recently, came out talking about how misogyny and climate change come hand in hand, and it all has to do with the fact that women need more resources, and therefore climate change is sexist. In that idea of women need more resources, it is true, they need more resources than men, because she'll maybe have children they need to look after, and you want your wife to be able to look after the kids. This is generally how it goes, is that if I was in a crisis, I'd want my kids to eat before my wife, but then I want my wife to eat before me. And this is very almost necessary if we're talking about pregnant women caught in a situation like this. They need those resources because the child is also feeding off them, so they're going to get hungrier faster, thirstier faster. They need those resources, otherwise their health suffers, the baby health suffers. But the guys, the fact we're not the ones who generally have to breastfeed, we're not the ones who breastfeed, we're not the ones that have to spend 9 months with a fetus growing inside us, that we can forego these resources. I'm getting off topic though, but that is what Catherine McKenna said, and this is the new narrative, and this just goes on to talk about them talking about how terrible, sexist, racist, transphobic, add whatever phobia you want in on top of that. They'll make these criticisms against our country. So if we are in such a bad place, if we are so bad morally that we treat women like shit and minorities like shit and anyone else who apparently isn't white, then why are we sending all this money to places like the Middle East, India, Asia, Africa? Why do we send this money out there if we're such a white supremacist place? Doesn't make sense to me. If we're such a terrible place, then why are we trying to help these people? It doesn't line up. Of course, I'm sure from their point of view, it's the liberals and the progressives. We're the ones going out helping people. Fuck the conservatives and the right-wingers. They're the ones not doing anything to help the world. Even though that's not true even remotely. That's not even remotely true. But the problem is they send all the money away, neglect the problems at home, and then they turn around, scratch their head and say, How are we in such a bad place right now? How did we get to this point where our people are so upset with us? Because we get left behind. Because we get left behind, and this is why nationalism has grown so heavily over the last few years, is because as people have gone to a more globalist agenda of, giving money out to the world, trying to set up international trade and all these international relations, at home, the rest of us feel we're being left out because the international community is demanding all this money. They say, well, we need money for this, and we need money for that, and we need to do this, and we need to do that. Meanwhile, at home, all our needs, our citizen needs, we're saying we don't want any of that. We want our government to look inward and protect us. We don't want a government to go out and actually have to worry about China's population. Let China worry about their population. Let China deal with their own issues. We've got our own. We've got our own. But they'll talk about how terrible our country is, and then for some reason they think if we're in such a bad position, we can go out and change the world. But you know what? Until you get yourself in order, you cannot get the rest of the world in order. And that is, in some regards, I think the mistake America has made in the past, is that America with its strong power, America with its power and its strong military, its strong navy, strong air force, and because their country does well, I think in the past, they've believed that, well, now we can go out and help change the world, make the world a better place. But they have a lot of their own issues that they have to take care of at home, that they just charge right in to become the world's police. And in doing so, they actually cause more problems at home, more problems for themselves, more problems internationally in the fact that there are people out there who don't like them because they come in and play world police. This seemed to happen, I guess America was kind of starting to do that ever since World War I would say, but World War II, ever since then, that was it. Because that was the height when America's power was sealed. It was World War II when America came in and they proved themselves to be the world power during World War II. So ever since then, I feel that when they felt they came in and helped the Allies out, several years after the start of the war, but when they came in and helped us out, they realized, well, we did something good, and then we went in and Japan was attacking us. We helped build up Japan. We helped build up Germany. They're doing well again. Not at the time, but they were seeing how they were doing something. They came in and then they helped rebuild the society, created allies. So they felt that they could go around the world doing this. They would rush in, save the population from the terrible regime in place, install democracy and freedom, and then the world's going to love America, and then Western values will be spread across the world. But you can't spread Western values at the point of a gun. So this is where I think that the problem with America, what they did, is that they went in, tried to be the world police, tried to be the domineering people on the world stage, and when that happened, they forgot about their problems at home. They stopped dealing with their problems at home because they felt they had bigger problems internationally. So in some way, we need to figure out how our government, in some way, we need to figure out some way to tell our government that they need to stop worrying about the world's problems and they need to focus their attention inwards to their own citizens. Listen to what their citizens are saying. Because they don't, and this is what gives rise to populist platforms. This is what Donald Trump wrote in on. This is what Rob Ford is writing in on, because we feel for a long time none of our issues are getting addressed, none of our questions are being answered, and for a long time this has been acceptable in politics. Oh, absolutely, Justin Trudeau just switches the subject, no problem. Kathleen Wynne won't give you a direct answer, no problem. Just let them be. Let them do their jobs. But this is no longer acceptable for people. And now we want people to come in who will hold people accountable, who will go in and actually say, well, from what I've heard and from what I am hearing now, this is what the people want. So let's make this work. This is why Ford's going to win. This is why Trump won. This is why globalism is losing, why nationalism is rising. Because you only need one person to come in and say, fuck the rest of the world, I'm worried about my own people. And people are going to rally behind that. They're going to rally. We've seen it time and time and time again. But the media, our government, they've got a real thing against the populist platform. In fact, when Donald Trump came in and he was the start of the modern day populist, the first comparison they made was to Hitler and his populist platform. They said, oh, well, look what happened last time we had Hitler. It's like, yeah, that doesn't mean that we're going to jump right to Hitler. And just because Hitler did happen to go on a populist platform, why do you think that means that the government who is in charge, as long as they don't go on a populist platform, they can't turn tyrannical? They can't turn into a killing machine of its own citizens. It can happen. It has happened before many, many times. So there's no reason to believe that it can't happen again. But populism is seen as the problem. Oh, if populism, what the people want, why would we want to do that? Because we're the ones who have to live through it every day. We're the ones whose voices never get fucking heard. And then somebody comes in who's willing to hear our voices. We'll put a lot of support behind that. We'll put a lot of loyalty behind that. This is what captured me about Doug Ford off the start, is the fact that he said that he's actually going to go in and listen to something that I have to say and Joe Blow down the street has to say, because it actually matters. On top of that, he has the record to back that up. That's another thing that he has going for him, is the fact that he can say, I've actually done this before. When I was a Toronto city councillor, I listened to what people said. And there was a reason that even to today, the second he threw his name in, Ford Nation came out strong. There's a reason for it. And this is why Ford Nation grew. And it's going to keep growing. This sentiment has arrived in Canada. Kevin O'Leary almost captured that back in the federal election. He almost did. And he would have if he hadn't dropped out. Canada was yearning for a populist candidate. And Kevin O'Leary seemed to be that guy. At the time, I will admit that I was not interested in him as leader of the Conservative Party. As I've paid more attention to politics and as I've evolved my point of view, my political opinions, I do think we need a populist guy. And this is what Ford has done. Ford came in, and I think in some way people will say that Jason Kenney, who I believe is the leader of the Conservative Party of Alberta, if I remember correctly, this is why he's actually done pretty well for himself over the last year or so. Is for the same reason, it seems, although Doug Ford seems to have captured that populist platform a lot better than he has. And if Doug Ford does come in to win, then this will be an interesting turn of events, because it sounds like Doug Ford is prepared to unite with the Western Conservative provinces in order to fight back against Justin Trudeau. So this is going to be very interesting, because it sounds like, as it stands, in the next coming election for Alberta, which I believe happens in this year, actually, I think it's 2018 when that election happens. It's very likely Premier Rachel Notley will not be voted back in again, and it sounds like Jason Kenney is going to be the one who everybody wants. And then when we see a more united provinces, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Ontario, Justin Trudeau is going to lose a lot of support, especially considering that Kathleen Wynne is one of his strongest allies inside the provinces. So if this was to happen, we actually would have a strong united front against Justin Trudeau. And goddamn, I really hope that happens, because we need a strong united front against Justin Trudeau in order to stop this. Honestly, some of the worst corruption I've ever seen in Canadian politics. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion, and I will see you all soon.